Before we begin, I know you said you want to discuss G.I. Joe for me, and I'm ready to do that, but I just wanted to congratulate you on a great job last week. You took the conversation in a different way, unexpected way that I wasn't anticipating, where you talked about how you hated Michael Bay's version of Megatron because it takes so many pieces to transform the bot, Megatron. I didn't expect that. I did hear discussions online about that, but it was always in a positive way. They liked that. And before we begin on G.I. Joe, I wanted to tell you real quick the reasons why I didn't mind that, even though you did.
Right, go ahead.
All right. First thing, I think Michael Bay wanted to make this project his own, something that very few people can copy or emulate. He wanted to make it unique, and that's the reason why he did that. But the reason why I didn't have a problem with it is because I like the fact that he made Megatron into something that could transform into a ship versus the G1 cartoon comparison in the 80s where Megatron is a robot that can transform into a gun that can be fired by a human being. I always hated the 1980s version of Megatron for that reason. And it's because they use what I hear discussed online is mass shifting to explain away a lot of things. Same thing with 1980s version of Soundwave. He transforms into a cassette tape that of the 1980s that a human being can carry in their pocket. I've always liked big bots, small bots that transform into big bots, combiner transformers, stuff like that, big bots that fight each other. I never liked that concept of mass shifting. I didn't focus like you did on the issue of how many pieces it takes, about 300 you said, to transform Megatron from a ship to a bot or a tank. Although I gotta admit, the triple changer Megatron was a bit over the top. That's the reason why I didn't really have an issue with it. Because I preferred that, even though I thought that was over the top, over the 1980s version of Megatron.
Well, I mean, you make valid points, and I'll give you that. More or less, though, I will say that one of the things that bugged me about the Michael Bay, on top of the, I guess what they call mass shifting.
Yes.
One of the things that bothered me on top of all that is just the overall complexity of what's going on. You really can't, I mean, if you don't see, how do I put this? If you take away the end product and the start and the end, you don't see at all what they're transforming into or out to. It's just kind of a mass of metal flying around, and then boom, humanoid, boom, ship, boom, car. It kind of bothered me that you don't know what you're looking at. Optimus Prime was the exception, and that was only because of his distinct, truck form with the flames and the blue. But aside from that, you really don't know what you're looking at with the Decepticons. So that was my thing.
Okay, so you're saying that the transformations of the Decepticons were like too fast for you to enjoy?
Too fast, too overly complicated. I mean, when I think about the Transformers, I've always remembered the 1980s cartoons where, basically the car does a wheelie and, the head flips down and boom, humanoid. The doors come out and they become arms and we're good to go, just like that. Maybe it is a little too simple in the 1980s cartoon, but they went from too simple to
complicated,
super complex that, I know they produced toys for it, but if they were to produce toys that transformed in the same nature as the show, or as the movie, I could have bought one when the first Transformers movie came out, and I would still be working on it.
Okay. One of the things I would give credit to Michael Bay on is whether or not Autobots can fly. And I give credit for Michael Bay because he didn't get into that issue. If you remember, one of the things that Spike Wiki, not in the movies, but in the 80s cartoon would say, or another Autobots would say, Decepticons can fly, but Autobots can't. But in the first episode, or I think the second episode of that cartoon, you would see Ironhide, which is an Autobot that transforms into a van, get up and fly, contradicting all the statements that were made about Autobots can't fly. Now, Michael Bay didn't have that issue because he didn't create that issue in his movie. He kept it pretty simple. Decepticons can fly if they have an alt jet mode, or they can if they don't have an alt jet mode. Same with the Autobots. The Autobots can't fly because the majority of them don't have alt jet modes. That's how simple he kept it.
Right.
So,
and in a sense, when you say that, I am a fan of that because, yeah, the 1980s cartoon. Well, I mean, we don't have to mince words about it. The 1980s cartoon was made to sell a toy. Somebody came up with a toy in a marketing meeting, like, hey, you know, these Hot Wheels are a big thing right now. What if the Hot Wheels transformed into, robots? And somebody said, okay, but how do we sell it? We make a cartoon. It's a 30-minute commercial with commercials in between it. That's all the Transformers cartoon really was, if you want to break it down. Right. But I do like that Michael Bay said, okay, Autobots, you're cars. You don't fly because cars don't fly. Decepticons, well, you transform into a myriad of things, so if what you transform into can fly, then you fly.
Okay. And the second issue, which I don't have a problem with, and if Michael Bay brought it up, I wouldn't have had a problem, is where does Optimus Prime's trailer disappear to when he's in robot mode?
Oh, now, well, I mean, that is just an ongoing meme or joke. Is, you know, his trailer disappears unless if I remember correctly, his trailer is also some sort of super weapon.
Right.
Unless he needs his trailer super weapon, then it comes from nowhere it comes from the void in which it vanishes to become the super weapon he needs. Aside from that, void. Nowhere to be found.
Yeah, I've heard people use the term void, alternate dimension, pocket dimension, to explain that away. When I was a kid, I always thought it just hit around the corner somewhere. It just backed into a corner by itself until Optimus Prime needs it to transform. But either way, I don't mind the interdimensional stuff. It's just the mass shifting, size shifting. I don't know if you can't tell, but I'm not a big fan of Ant-Man. I'm not rushing to go see that film. I don't hate Ant-Man or what he's about or the Atom from the DC Comics. But I don't want to see that concept brought into the Transformers. Although I don't think I'm going to get my wish because I had heard that Hasbro wants to mix the properties of the Micronauts, which deals with the Microverse. That's kind of getting into Ant-Man. That's a discussion one time, I suppose.
Yeah, no, I am not. I did not know that, and I am lamenting the idea of it. So, well, like I said, I don't want to see it mixed with Transformers, and I mean, as far as Transformers is concerned, I am not, how do I put it? I am not against a lot of it. Realistically, the only thing I have an issue with, aside from the formulaic ET thing we discussed in last week's recording, was that, you know, they have this overly complicated way of shifting. Transforming, shifting, whatever you want to call it. It's too hard for the eye to follow, and it doesn't really make sense to the simple. I don't want to call it the simple folk, but, you know, if you don't know what you're looking at, you've never seen a Transformers movie in your life before, you just kind of wondering why these things are degrading and falling apart. It doesn't seem like the reason. It doesn't seem like if you don't know that you're watching a Transformers movie, you won't really understand. I guess the easiest way to put it is to say, if you were in a coma since the 1980s and you heard there was a Transformers movie when you woke up and you watched Michael Bay's version, you would kind of be a little confused as to why the transformations are so
complicated.
Yeah. And I mean, I know that sounds cliche to say, but I mean, for me, you have to keep in mind that Transformers was when I was a child. And after I kind of grew out of that, I went on to, you know, cars and girls and all this other stuff. And I'm not going to say I forgot all about Transformers, but I didn't follow it at all. So when it came back, I said, oh, this is from my childhood. Let me check it out. And all I could see was this mishmash of metal flying around, and then boom, Optimus Prime. Boom, Megatron. It kind of threw me for a loop. I won't say it disappointed me. I won't say I was upset at it. It just kind of, it was not what I was expecting to see.
Okay. You said, okay, you wanted to discuss G.I. Joe, the movie, and I'm going to go through that with you. So, what's your take on that movie? Did you hate it, or did you find it cool? It was a summer movie back in 2009.
Okay, here we go. G.I. Joe the movie. Let's start with the very obvious, where I say who was asking for this.
Oh, so you don't think that there's a large fan base for G.I. Joe in this era?
Now, keep in mind, when it comes to, I guess, the nerd culture, the geek culture, whatever you want to call it, I know that we have a certain following for things that can be made into movies and things that can't. You know, Marvel movies, DC movies, the things we're seeing now, very mainstream. Those can be made into movies, mostly because the storyline and the writing is very linear. And not to say linear, but it makes sense. It's arcing. That's the word I'm looking for. There's a core plot line. It arcs. You can't pick up issue number 5 and expect to know everything that's going on if you haven't read issue number 3 and 4, so to speak. Now, when you think about G.I. Joe, and when I think about G.I. Joe, at least the 1980s, early 90s G.I. Joe, you can watch any episode. I mean, I could queue it up on YouTube right now, and you can watch any episode. Although the core is always the same. Cobra is doing a thing. Bad guys do things. We shoot at the ground. Nobody really dies. They run away because G.I. Joe is the good guy. Cool story, bro. We're good to go. There's no real, I'm not going to say there's no, because I didn't follow it that intensely, but to what I see, there isn't a whole lot of arcing story plot going there. So, with that being said, I have to ask, when they made G.I. Joe, it kind of seemed like somebody saw Transformers and said, oh, wow, Transformers is really taking off. We should get G.I. Joe and do the same thing. And my question is, who was asking for G.I. Joe? Who wanted that?
Well, I'm going to make an assumption that it was G.I. Joe fans who were probably looking for G.I. Joe. Probably those who were inspired to join the military after watching G.I. Joe. Maybe. I don't know. I can't really speak for everybody out there to really answer that question that you had.
Well, I mean, my first question is only the tip of the iceberg, really. I didn't want to see it. It's not that I didn't want to see it on this big screen, like I was vehemently against it, as much as I had given it absolutely no thought. It was never a thought in my head prior to the movie that, oh, after seeing Transformers, we should make a G.I. Joe movie. That never crossed my mind. Not once. It was simply, G.I. Joe was a thing. We all loved it as kids. You know, flying helicopters, laser weapons. Well, flying helicopters helicopters don't fly, but you know, crazy tanks and super weapons and, you know, lasers and bright colors, and we're all sitting in front eating sugar-laced cereal. And that's just what the 80s and 90s was for us. And now it's over. And we didn't think about, oh, I want to see G.I. Joe on the big screen. It never crossed my mind. So that's why I asked, who asked for this? My second issue with the movie is G.I. Joe, again, falls back on the original source material. Wasn't a whole lot of plot going on there. So when they try to interject this plot into it, it becomes this thing that, honestly, you could have called it anything else. You put Marlon Wayans, if I remember correctly, was in it.
Right, he was Ripcord.
Yeah, exactly. You could have named him anything else. You could have changed all the names around, and it could have been any other movie. Realistically, it could have been your run-of-the-mill mil-sim sci-fi movie, just like The Day After Tomorrow, or is The Day After Tomorrow the one with Tom Cruise?
Oh, I think that was, you're referring to Edge of Tomorrow.
Edge of Tomorrow, yes, there we go. Edge of Tomorrow. It could have been just another Edge of Tomorrow, and no one would have noticed. I don't really believe, when I watch that movie, and every time that I have seen the G.I. Joe movie, I don't really believe that it was written as a G.I. Joe movie. I believe that it was a name they slapped on it, some quick edits to the script, minor little tweaks here and there, some name changes, and boom, G.I. Joe. Because realistically, you could do that with any mil-sim, near future tech type of military movie.
So do you think that after watching the movie, this wasn't the best representation of G.I. Joe, the cartoon?
I will say this, I don't believe that because of G.I. Joe's lack of plot and hard storyline, I don't believe that there is a fair representation of G.I. Joe. I really don't. G.I. Joe was just another cartoon that was made to sell toys, but unlike Transformers, where they took a moment to say, okay, well, this is Cybertron, everything that they're doing is leading up to this. This is the Allspark. There was a lot. There wasn't a lot, but there was a core lore to Transformers. G.I. Joe. I mean, I have to go back and watch it because I don't want to be the guy who's super wrong and just talking out of my ass. But G.I. Joe doesn't really have that. But it doesn't really. I mean, they have it in a sense, but it's not as engaging or even important as
relevant. And it goes back to what you had said. You could have called it the military force. It wouldn't make a difference. It's because it doesn't really have a relevance that captures the audience or holds the audience interest.
Mm-hmm.
It seems almost irrelevant to you because it just comes across to you like a military story or a cop story, a police officer story.
Yeah, that's all it is. And hey, I'm not saying that its execution was bad. I don't want that to be the message, the takeaway here. I'm not saying in any way that the execution was bad. I am, however,
to compare to any other movie you've seen in the past involving military.
It's not unique, and it doesn't represent. It doesn't scream It doesn't scream G.I. Joe to me. It seems like they just slapped a name on it and said, "Here you go, G.I. Joe the movie."
Okay, that's interesting. Before I called you up about this review, I was thinking about what made G.I. Joe so special, the cartoon that I grew up on back in the 80s. And it was this: when you saw G.I. Joe characters on the screen and they stood next to military officers, you could tell the difference between an ordinary military officer depicted in a cartoon and G.I. Joe, the action figure or cartoon standing next to him. They were always colorful. They had different colors, different style looks.
Right.
Military officers basically wore basic green, light green, brown, solid colors that you see all the time. But not G.I. Joe. They were rainbow bright colors, different colors. Also, their vehicles were quite unique. Not legitimately real or made any sense if you asked any expert engineer. But could this vehicle work in real life? Would this be a really good military tactical vehicle that would be really beneficial to military service? They'll say no, and they'll give you a whole explanation why. But the bottom line was they were futuristic, concept driven. This was the elite of the elite. These weren't your ordinary military officers up the mill, and I think that's
right.
relevant when you see them, the Joes, or Duke and Ripcord, played by Marlon Wayans, in the cool exosuits, which I know you weren't probably excited about that at all, since you've already been spoiled with Iron Man movies, stuff like that, colorful red and gold Iron Man movies, and then you see this gray exosuit. But the reason why they probably have that in the film is to show you that these are elite officers. Or when you talk about the Cobra agents, the whole big deal with them were the Neo Vipers, these genetically engineered soldiers for Cobra that could fight off poison if they were ever poisoned. That's what made them so special.
Well, I do understand the concept of individuals being special, being special and, special forces and the like. But at the same time, okay, when you bring G.I. Joe, this is going to sound really kind of weird and almost hypocritical of me because of my way of thinking about Transformers. But if you're going to bring G.I. Joe into the big screen, I'll say this. They did largely do away with the bright colors, but you have to do away with the cowboy, so to speak. You have to do away with the cowboy of these military officers, especially in the G.I. Joe side, where they do what they want, they say what they want, they act like they don't have a contract with the U.S. government because they're just that good. And it's kind of one of those things where no one gets to be that good and maintain that kind of demeanor. That was my problem with Marlon Wayans.
Yeah.
Everything was punctuated with a joke. He was never really quite serious.
And at military officers are serious. I would agree with you on that. Absolutely right.
Yeah.
That goes to another point I had about this movie when I saw it. The issue I had with it, which is related to what you're saying, is the relationships. One in particular where Ripcord, played by Marlon Wayans, has a relationship with his co-star. I forgot the actress's name, but she plays Scarlet. they have a love interest, and that's depicted by her kissing him when he goes into the Night Raven. Those I spoke to will tell you that it's so strict about you having a relationship with the opposite sex that you, if you were a military officer, can't even march next to a female military officer because that is not allowed. But they're very cavalier about it in this story because I'm assuming that the producers who made this think that a love story is important for a good movie.
To my knowledge, it's not allowed, and if it is allowed, there's paperwork, so to speak, and they won't be working in the same. I'm sure on some level it is allowed, but there's paperwork, so to speak, and definitely not in the field, and definitely not within the same department.
Right. Well, actually, no, it's not. They have something called the UCMJ, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and it strictly prohibits any kind of even close proximity to the opposite sex.
Oh, really?
But, yeah, I think it goes to your point about the seriousness of this movie, and including that and trying to mix that up with the military concept. It just doesn't work, and I would agree with you on that totally.
Right. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. You were going to say something?
So, we bounce off of that. So now we talk about G.I. Joe as a franchise, and not a franchise, but as a movie in and of itself. I went into how it was just generic. We can just call it short and everything. I said into it's a generic movie. The other thing I didn't really enjoy about it at all was they paid a lot of attention, and I don't want to say I didn't enjoy it, but it's a double-edged sword. They paid a lot of attention to certain characters and their look being represented from the cartoon into the big screen live action, like the ninja characters,
Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow.
Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow.
Right.
I think they're very well represented. It's if you were to evolve them from the 1980s to current day, you'd say, okay, that makes sense. I'm with that. I'm good with that. But then you get the other characters, and it's kind of just, they didn't really try. It was just, okay. I guess this is who you're looking at because this is the name we gave them. You see what I'm getting at? It's inconsistent and it kind of falls apart.
Okay, so you like the way Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow were portrayed, but you think that the other characters of the story weren't portrayed as well as them. I'm not sure why, though.
I
heard the critical argument you made with Marlon Wayans, and I would agree with you on that. But or were you trying to talk about other people, like maybe the character who I guess they call him Magic Mike? I forget his real name. The actor who played Duke.
Yeah, Duke and Channing Tatum and Duke, and I get it because the way that they look but the way that they look in the cartoon is almost like generic military fatigue A and generic military fatigue B, and go. But at the same time, it doesn't scream Duke to me. That's the one that gets me. It does not scream Duke. It screams, honestly, when I look at him, I don't see Duke. I can just say it like that. When I look at him, I do not see Duke. And
that's interesting you would say that, because Channing Tatum said he didn't really enjoy the role of playing Duke, although he played it in two different versions of G.I. Joe. And I thought, even though you didn't think he portrayed it well, I didn't think he did a bad job with it. I think what they tried to do with him was a little bit unnecessary, and I thought brought down the film a little bit. You thought this film was, I guess, a major fail then?
In totality, yeah. I would say it's a major fail. I think the entire concept of G.I. Joe, it's one of those things that we don't need to see on the big screen.
But you didn't see the movie completely up to now?
I did see it, and I hadn't seen it completely until recently, but I will say that it's not something we needed to see on the big screen. If anything, you could have made that a Netflix series. You could have made it I don't know the timeline for Netflix, but I'm not sure if it was around or at least producing original content in 2009. But you could have made it a Netflix series. You could have made it a straight to DVD. It didn't seem like something that they should have dumped the kind of money they did into it and put it to the big screen to try to make their money back and then some. It just doesn't. I'm not a fan. I think the 80s is wrought with a lot of things you can mine for nostalgia and to remake. There's a lot of things out there in the 80s that were already produced. G.I. Joe's just not one of them.
Wow. Sounds like a total rejection.
Yeah.
When I understand what you're saying, you've seen enough of this type of movie already where you weren't totally taken with it. I didn't mind it. I did have some issues with it. Let me ask you individual questions, like about characters individually. You already talked about Marlon Wayans. What do you think about the terrorist leader, Cobra Commander? Do you think that his character, if you were to judge him by himself, was portrayed well?
Oh, well, see, that's the thing, and I know it's going to sound weird coming from me now after everything I've said, but the thing is actors-wise, I think everybody did a spectacular job. I think everybody did a great job with the content that they were given. I honestly believe that. I'm not patronizing. I think that they were all given content, and I think that they did the best they could, and they did a good job with the content they were given.
Okay.
So it wasn't as if I was watching the movie thinking, "Wow, none of these people can act." Even Channing Tatum, I thought, this is Magic Mike. Yeah, I really thought, okay, well, this is one of his debut roles, but at the same time, he did well enough. I wasn't horribly disappointed by him as an actor. I was horribly disappointed by the movie and the script. Everybody in it was, I would say, C+ and above.
Okay, let me ask you this question real quick, and it's away from what I planned to ask you. Would you prefer the cheerleader humans from the Transformer movies over watching a G.I. Joe action movie, like what you saw with this, or vice versa?
That's a tough one. I would say the G.I. Joe movie, because the cheerleader humans, they're not as good as far as actors are concerned.
Okay, but separate the Transformer bots and the war, and just focus on the humans that are portrayed in the movie, like Shia LaBeouf, who yells "Octopus!" or "Bumblebee." You prefer that over Channing Tatum saying, "Hold on, I'm coming in with the AR-50." He's firing AR-50 all over the place, but you get my point, though. You prefer.
I get your point, and I will say I prefer the G.I. Joe actors. I prefer that movie against the cheerleader humans of Transformers, because if I take away the Transformers, I can honestly say that all those actors, including Shia LaBeouf, I've seen Shia LaBeouf in some good things. Let me just say that. I've seen him in some good things. I was a huge fan of Fury. He was my favorite character in that.
I have yet to see that movie. I've heard of that movie where he plays with forgot his name already. He is absolutely spectacular in Fury. Yeah, but I have yet to see it, but I will try and see that when I get some time.
But with that being said, in Transformers, I get it. It was one of his earlier roles, and I get it. You're working with what you're given, but it wasn't good. Okay. It wasn't. Megan Fox again. I mean, hey, I'm all for letting everybody have their career, and I'm real happy for them, and I hope they make all the money in the world. Okay. But it doesn't change the fact that it wasn't good. Megan Fox wasn't good. Josh Duhamel. I mean, to be honest with you, I was disappointed by him the most.
Really? I thought he was not bad.
He wasn't bad, but I was disappointed by Josh Duhamel the most, only because when I first saw him as an actor was when I was working graveyard shift security. So I would come home and I would wake up during the day and watch daytime TV and get ready for my shift. And he was in a TV show called, I believe it was called Las Vegas. might have been called Casino or something. It took place in a casino.
I don't think I've
Either
seen
way, it was one of those TBS USA shows that aired during the day that used to be primetime, but just got moved to daytime TV.
That's probably why I've seen it.
Either way, it was good. I thought he was good in it. And I thought, oh, well, if Josh Duhamel's in this Transformers movie, then, you know, he's going to bring his certain brand of levity and at the same time, you know, seriousness to the role. And he brought all the seriousness with almost no levity, to the point where even his levity seemed too serious. So, no, he's the one that let me down the most. I had low expectations for Megan Fox. I will admit that, you know, Shia LaBeouf, the last time I saw him, he was in a Disney production. So I was kind of like, okay, well, if he wants to keep acting, let the boy do what he want to do. Josh Duhamel was the one that I was familiar with his work going into the first Transformers, and I felt let down. I really didn't feel like that was his A game. So with that being said, I would prefer the G.I. Joe actors over the acting. I'll say not the actors, but the acting G.I. Joe over the acting, the human acting in Transformers.
Okay. I didn't have a problem with Marlon Wayne's role, except the relationship he was trying to have with Scarlett, because I thought that was counter to the way real life works. But I thought he did a pretty good job. He wasn't overly funny, or at least trying to be funny with the jokes, as he's done in the past with other movies. He just had fun with it, which I think you didn't like for a movie that's supposed to have a serious overtone when it's representing the military.
I will tell you this right now. Full disclosure. I am one of those people who does not like. I do not like when comedic actors take on action roles. I am fine with comedic actors taking on more serious or mellow, kind of even depressing roles. But for some reason, it's only happened a handful of times, but for some reason, if you do comedy, you can either be funny and happy, or you can be sad. I don't want to see you be the action hero. I don't want to see it. And I have to say that is a personal preference of mine. That's in no way a definition of anybody's acting ability. I just don't feel like, because Marlon Wayans, again, when I saw Marlon Wayans the first time was the Wayans Bros TV show. He was funny. I still think Marlon Wayans is funny today. But, you know, you put him in an action role and I'm just kind of like, no, you don't do that.
It would depend on the actor and the performance he or she puts out there before I can put a whole judgment on all comedians can't be actors in an action movie. Before I blanket all comedians as people who can't do action films and be taken seriously, I would have to see the movie first that he or she is in, and make that judgment for myself. I thought Marlon Wayans did a pretty good job outside of the love story that they tried to interject in this action movie, which I didn't think was needed. I just thought that the characters that popped up in the movie were portrayed honorably to the stories they come from, to the cartoon and comic book stories they come from. For example, Cobra Commander, for the most part in his comic books and cartoons, he was a mystery to a lot of people. There were some revelations that were revealed, but they were big explosive revelations. In the movie, he's depicted as Duke's little buddy, and he even creates a plot hole in the movie by saying, when Duke asks Rex, who later is Cobra Commander, why didn't you just come in and explain what happened to you? And he creates a plot hole by saying, because I discovered something. And we don't know what it is he discovered, but it's got to be amazing. And the audience is left wondering what that is. Same thing with Destro. Real Identity, James McCullen. He creates a plot hole too when Duke asks him, so why did you steal back the weapon you built for NATO? And he says, to give it to the person with the most power. And Duke assumes, is that you? He says, no, you're not getting the big picture. And so he leaves basically a mystery there. These little mysteries that are not not really interesting to be mysteries to begin with. That they try to create to capture the audience attention, I think. My point is, I think there are some mysteries that should remain mysteries, and I think that there are some mysteries that shouldn't be attempted. In the case of Cobra Commander, the revelation of him being Duke's little buddy named Rex, I didn't like that. It made him seem really small and kiddish.
Okay, see, now you're touching, and this is why whenever we have these conversations, which I enjoy so much, we keep going back. I keep falling back on other movies and other franchises to explain myself, is because I have that same problem with the Star Wars universe. Why is everything that's happening, all the political strife, all the war, have to do with around the same group of roughly 20 people? It's in a giant universe, and in the same sense of G.I. Joe, we didn't need him to be, his little buddy. He could have been anybody. There are billions of people on the planet, and at least half of them have to have a problem with USA or G.I. Joe. It could have been anybody, but they made it this, you're connected. Like, why does he have to be connected?
And I think the reason why they did that is to make Duke relevant, Duke the story. They wanted the audience to focus on Duke, a.k.a. Comrade Hauser. And I don't think they'd have to be. G.I. Joe is about a team of individuals. However, I will say this, in the cartoon, there was a lot of focus on Duke, or at least a lot of attempted focus, before they eventually killed off the character. They actually did, although they didn't try to make it so obvious, because kids get skittish when you talk about killing off their favorite characters. But Duke, back in the 80s, was killed eventually. And I think that's the reason why they did that between him and the character Rex. I also think that's why they made a love story between the Baroness, played by actress Sienna Miller, and Duke, but I think it was to make Duke relevant. And I didn't like that either.
And that was the thing is, I feel like if you were going to make Duke relevant, which at the same time I still maintain my original opinion, but Duke should be made relevant because he's Duke. You could give him any other reason for what he's doing, but it seems like they fall on these formulas, and that one, just like that one, falls to be the Star Wars one. Make the main character and the main antagonist and protagonist, make them connected in more ways than just being at the opposite end of this conflict.
Yeah. That's
just the Star Wars formula now. And like I said, all these formulas come from genius movies who have it done once or twice, and all of a sudden it has to be a thing forever. And they did it. They did it again. Duke and Cobra Commander, they're connected. It wasn't father and son, but still connected.
I thought the Baroness was misportrayed. I didn't think they did a good job honoring her comic book version in comparison to the movie they came up with in 2009. They didn't honor the fact that she was a foreigner. She had a foreign accent. And the fact that she came from a rich background just made her out to be some sort of American who had an American relationship with an American military officer, Duke. They tried to visually portray her assets, or her breasts, instead of the other features that was often portrayed in the comic books, which was her intelligence, her legs, her accent, her beautiful accent. They left that out, so they didn't say true to that too much. I was a little disappointed that they didn't stay true to the comic book version with that issue. But those are small issues. But
you say they're small issues, and I'm going to have to say I disagree. I disagree wholeheartedly that those are small issues. Because, one, her accent, while, you say it's beautiful, and I can't remember it off the top of my head, but, I will say that her accent gives her character depth as to where she's from and who she is as a person. Because as we come from different backgrounds, our backgrounds shape us as who we are. I mean, look at our family. Our family is Panamanian, which means a lot of things that come from, I will say, American black culture, a lot of it does apply to us, and some of it we have a little extra there. And that's the part that gets me. It's in no way necessary. We don't need it. And then the thing that gets me as well, and not to come off as that feminist guy, I'm not going to get into my political beliefs at all, or my social beliefs, but we'll say that instead of giving the character depth, and saying like, hey, here's this hot chick and she's from, you know, England or Australia or whatever you want to give her, wherever accent you want to give her that kind of lines up with the original. You said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to just be like, hey, look, titties. And it's kind of like, okay, but why does she not have any depth? And that's not me to say that women characters always need depth. I'm not getting on some, you know, point like that. I am saying that if you write a movie, an action movie, a romance movie, a comedy, all your characters, male or female, need to have equal amounts of depth, depending on how important they are. So when you make her character be based on, hey, look, titties, you've basically said she's not important. She's a Lego brick. She's an avatar for Duke's affection. And honestly, it's unacceptable. I can't really take a movie too seriously when you say this is what she does. She's got a smart mouth. She's got lines that are quirky, and she bounces off Duke as, you know, straight man and comic relief sort of thing, relationship going on there. But at the end of the day, she is there to supplement Duke.
So I guess you and I would be in agreement then if they gave her stay true to the origin of the character from the toy lines to the comic books, and they focus on the fact that she had a diverse background that wasn't American, of course. It would have added to some depth that would have worked.
Right.
Okay, I would agree with that. So what do you think about some of the stuff that the special effects that they had, like I brought up earlier in our conversation, the suits. Some people say that wasn't needed. They look kind of awkward. They also had the underwater battle scene, which I thought was pretty cool. It almost seemed like Star Wars Episode 1, kind of like.
Okay. I'm going to say it, and it is just my belief, but when we get movies like this, where the special effects are nice, but the story is kind of meh, I see these, because I do appreciate the special effects, all of them. But I will say that it comes off as almost a demo reel for the studio who's handling the CGI. That's how it comes off. As the movie, if you separate the special effects into look at how cool this looks, A+. Well, I mean, by 2009 standards. I'm good with it. I am. I'm good with it. The exoskeletons, they weren't Iron Man Marvel movie tier, but at the same time, they weren't bad. They weren't awkward, or I didn't feel like they were awkward or janky or like, wow, they could have really done a better job with that. Not at all. I was pretty satisfied with what I was looking at. But because G.I. Joe the movie, it really just comes off as, look, we're a design studio, we're a 3D render farm, and this is what we do. The movie almost seems it almost plays as if a canvas to showcase the studio, the rendering studio, and the 3D, not 3D, but the CGI effect. And although I love looking at CGI effects in movies, I am one of those people who feel that CGI effects should supplement the storyline. You shouldn't write a storyline around the CGI effects.
Right, so you're saying CGI effects should add to the storyline. Okay, so basically you don't think that this did a good job helping the story out, helping the story progress along?
Not at all. Okay. I liked what I was looking at, but at the end of the day, I don't think you could have advanced the story without it.
And it wouldn't have helped. That's it. I get your point.
It wouldn't have held the movie back. I mean, the underwater scene, sure, but aside from that, you could have done that whole movie without those exoskeletons, without a lot of the CGI effects. The only thing that really mattered in the CGI effects is when we start talking about, Storm Shadow. Then the ninja characters, then the CGI looks really good and it's really necessary. But other than that, what for?
And I understand, that's cool. A lot of people felt the same way. I've heard some of the reviews on it. It was somewhat mixed, but it was total fail. If you look at the score on Rotten Tomatoes, it just didn't work. there are some people who were excited with it, and they think that this was better than other versions that they've seen. But you're not alone in that category. What did you think about? Oh, and we talked about this before with other movies. It's PG rating. It looks like they were again trying to aim for children, and it was a PG rated 13. You think it would have helped this film if it was taken to the extreme level when it comes to the violence, maybe to a rated R level? In the past, you said no, that doesn't really matter, if I think correctly. But do you think it would have helped out with this movie?
With this movie, okay, I'm going to clarify something right now with the rated R and PG versus PG-13. This movie, you said, was PG, correct?
Correct.
This movie could have been
IMDb. That's what it said.
IMDb says it's a PG. I will say this movie could have benefited from a PG-13. But I feel that PG-13. Was this movie PG-13?
Yes.
Okay, well, they should have utilized their PG-13 flexibility a little bit more. I really feel that rated R movies, rated R, should be reserved for when you want to make something true to life. Especially in action and military movies like Fury. You're going to do a realistic military movie, you need the R rating.
If I remember correctly, Deadpool wasn't a realistic movie, and that was R rated, and it worked.
Well, it does work, but see, when Deadpool, again, you start going into not the realistic, but you start going into the character and how the character is written. The character swears, limbs get amputated, villains die in gruesome ways, and I'm not going to say there's no way to pull off a PG-13 Deadpool, but if you want to do Deadpool properly, you need the R rating. The R rating needs to be reserved for doing things properly. If what you're trying to say has a lot of blood in it, it's very adult language heavy, adult theme heavy, then yes, you do need an R rating. G.I. Joe, you can get away with a PG-13, but they needed to flex more of that PG-13 muscle. And it really feels when you watch the movie that they're going in with, okay, it's PG-13, but we're kind of aiming for the mom to bring the 11 and 10-year-olds. Oh,
so you're making the case that they could have taken it farther, even with the PG level that they're at. I thought that they got as far as they could in this movie in terms of what we saw in terms of the violence and the interaction between the characters. The light kissing scenes, the overall...
I think they could have gone, I don't want to say a lot farther, but they could have gone significantly farther.
That's an interesting point. One final thing, and then I kind of got to wrap it up. Yes, but Brendan Fraser was in this movie, and he's not one of my favorite actors, but I kind of like some of the movies he's been in. Did you think it was kind of messed up that he was just there to say "Yo, Joe," and then he just drives off scene? You think they should have been a little bit more fair to him in this movie, since the directors of this movie were the same guys who created The Mummy, which Brendan Fraser was a star of? They could have probably included him a little bit more in this movie. Do you think it was kind of messed up that they didn't really give him more of a role in this movie?
Right. So when it comes to that, I'm going to go ahead and say yes. Yes. Okay. I'm going to say that because this is difficult for me because overall, I'm not a fan. So I'm trying to improve upon this movie, but realistically, I'm just not a fan of the whole concept of this movie coming out.
Okay.
So, but
are you a fan then of Brendan Fraser? The reason why you said that, or is it because you think he could have helped this movie out a little more if they gave him more role in it?
Brendan Fraser?
Yes, actor Brendan Fraser.
He could have had a bigger role aside from Yo Joe. Brendan Fraser in that time was criminally underused simply because he was the movie The Mummy. The Mummy movies were, I think they were amazing. They're one of my favorite series of movies, and if they're on TV, I will watch them. And I think that's because he's great in them. And I think in G.I. Joe, he was criminally underused.
I agree. I agree.
So that's where I'm coming from with that. But again, it all boils down to this movie.
Was a fail.
I don't see. I mean, I feel fail is a little too harsh on it. I will feel that this movie, they shot for a C. When they made this movie, if we're grading in, our old high school days and what you would get in school grading.
Yes.
When they wrote and produced and shot and did, not the CGI, but when they wrote, produced and shot and, acted out this movie, they were shooting for a C. They wanted middle of the road, run of the mill. Let's just go for the safe infield hit type of movie.
Okay.
And
well, then I would agree with you. I thought this movie was a decent C as well. I thought you were going to go for maybe a low D. That's still considered passing.
That's what I get. That's what I'm getting at, is they shot for the middle of the road. And when you shoot for the middle of the road, you always come in under. I would give this movie a C minus D plus.
Okay. I would agree with you. Well, I would say more of a high C, but
they shot for the middle of the road. But I grade on what you're shooting for. Like Inception, let's take it to another franchise, another movie, Inception. Now, Inception shot for an A. They shot for an A, and I will give them that. But let's be real about something. That movie was way too long.
I think it was too.
It was way too long, and that's why, as much as I love Inception, and anybody who hasn't seen it, I will say, hey, make a sandwich, get some snacks, and sit through this movie. It's good. But if you've already seen it, hey, unless you need something to help you doze off, you can't. I'm not one of those people that can watch Inception multiple times. I've seen it 3 times, and I get it. I understand it. I know if he's dreaming or not dreaming. I don't need to see it again. But they shot for an A. For me, they got a B+. G.I. Joe shot for a C. You should never shoot for a C. Every day, all day, twice on Sunday, you shoot for an A. G.I. Joe didn't do that.